So today I wanted to make a video talking about why I glaze Sirene. A lot of people aren't happy when I bring up Sirene's possible value every time I bring up Ceridra's terrible value, right? The fact that Sirene is only 2 patches after Ciridra is for sure something to look out for, and I'll be explaining why exactly it is that Sirene could end up being way better than Ciridra and even possibly being as good as Ciridra in a Feyenon team. Right? The only best in slot team that woman has, right? So how could this happen? For those who don't know, the best damage amp for Feyenon in the entirety of the game, considering E0 as 0 supports, is Tribby. 30% vulnerability, 24% res pen. It's really hard to go wrong with that. So Tribby is the best amper for his damage in the game. However, something a lot of people don't know is that the second best damage amper for Feyenon, I do believe, is RMC. And the reason this is so interesting is because half of RMC's true damage doesn't work with Feyenon. Yup. 20% true damage. Completely wasted on Feyenon. He doesn't get this because he doesn't use normal energy. So Feyenon only gets 30% true damage and some of the crit damage buff. Yet still, RMC is the best amper in the entirety of the game for Feyenon's damage. Or sorry, second best, right? Behind Tribby. So, let's say Sirene has no energy requirement on her true damage. And even though she's probably meant to be an RMC upgrade, let's assume that her true damage buff isn't any more than what RMC provides at his max value, right? So she gives 50% true damage, likely team-wide since that is what is leaked, and possible action advance, right? This would instantly be competitive with Ceridra's value in a Feyenon team. Because as of current, V3 Ciridra, she is around a 20 to 25% upgrade at E0 over the likes of Bronya and some other characters, right? So if you were to add 20% true damage to Feyenon's damage, this instantly bridges the gap with E0 Sirene versus E0 Ciridra, right? So you are now 0 to maybe negative 5% worse than Ciridra if you get the same thing in Sirene, but Sirene has the way better general value, will likely replace Tribby as best in slot for a lot of the current meta teams, and will have incredible value going forward into version 4. And the other thing to consider is E1 investment. Tribby has the better E1 investment over Ciridra. The exact same thing applies to Robin's E1. Both of these usually give bigger amps than the number actually shown. So 24% true damage, assuming there's literally no upgrade in the E1 and it's just following the lines of Tribby, this would instantly be stronger than Ciridra for Feyenon, since the majority of Feyenon's attacks are not fully buffed by Ceridra's E1. Most of his attacks are only getting around 16% defense shred, and in total, this is probably less than a 15% overall damage increase at E0 with E0 teammates, right? So, you are comparing 24% true damage, overall damage increase, with likely a mechanic, I wouldn't be surprised, similar to Tribby's E1, versus a 10 to 15% damage increase for half the attacks, and then sometimes you're able to catch up, if not be slightly better, for a few of Feyenon's attacks with Ceridra's E1, right? So overall, very high possibility that Sirene could be on the exact same level as Ciridra for Feyenon if Sirene were to have no territory. And this is not considering the fact that she could have a second buff aside from true damage. Because Robin, Tribby, and Ruan Mei have 2 different types of buffs, if not more, in their kits for a DPS, right? Or the team buffing, right? So assuming that Cyrene's only buffing capability will be true damage is really just underestimating her likely future value. Meaning, very, very good chance if she has no territory, she will be comparable to Saridra, even in Saridra's best case scenario and one of her worst case scenarios, and then she will be noticeably better value in every other team in the game compared to Saridra, right? And the biggest benefactor of Cyrene if she had no territory would be Cassie. You would now be able to run like Cassie, Tribby, Cyrene, and Hyacine, or you could run, I don't know, Cassie, RMC, Hyacine, March. You can do a bunch of combos, right? But if she has no territory, she would actually benefit Cassie the most, at least for the current cast that we're aware of. Maybe March Hypercarry is better with Cyrene compared to Cassie, who knows, right? But this is just a quick video to explain my Cyrene glazing and why it is that I think she has incredible potential. The fact that if she were to have no territory and no energy requirements for her true damage buffs, like RMC does, she would be able to be competitive with Saridra in a Feyenon team given current Saridra's kit, and she doesn't receive further buffs in the future version for Feyenon. And every other team in the game would take massively better advantage of her than they could ever of Saridra, right? And on top of this, she will likely be best in slot for a majority of the version 4 characters upcoming, as this is exactly how Ruan Mei and Sunday were made. Last patch supports for a version are always the best value to invest in the entirety of the game. First one was Ruan Mei, second one was Sunday, and the third one is Cyrene. And no, 3.8 doesn't count. 3.8 is a filler patch that the devs made so that they could tie up loose ends in Penacony because they didn't like how Penacony ended. So 3.7 is kind of the real last patch of version 3, and it's the last patch of Amphorius as well, right? Love you all. Hope you have a great day. Hope you have a great night. Believe in the Cyrene stocks, and peace.